We are now arriving at the conclusion of this topic of photosynthesis, and we're going to do so by describing a few strategies plants can use for fixing carbon. And as you know, this is going to be the very first step of the Calvin cycle. The first group of plants we're going to explore is going to be the C3 plants. These plants are going to be widespread. They can be found in many different parts of the world. And what is characteristic about them is that they're going to be fixing carbon using the enzyme Rubisco very much in the same way we explored previously when we talked about the Calvin cycle. So just to remind you, Rubisco takes one molecule of carbon dioxide and it fixes it, it attaches it to the 5-carbon sugar ribulose biphosphate, and immediately this produces an intermediate highly unstable 3-carbon sugar, and it's phosphoglycerate. And because phosphoglycerate is this 3-carbon sugar, that's why we call this strategy the C3 strategy of the C3 plants. And what's the situation with these plants if the weather gets too harsh for them? Like if the weather gets too dry or too hot, and water becomes limited. If that's the case, plants are going to be closing these openings they have usually on the underside of a leaf. The openings are called stomata. Stomata is many. One opening is stoma. Here we have two of those, stomata. So anyway, when the plant closes the stomata to save water, the problem is that CO2 cannot come in. Plants can lose water through the stomata in the same way you can lose moisture from your body when you exhale. If you put your face close to a mirror or a glass, you can see that it turns foggy, and that's because of the moisture in the air you're exhaling. And so the same way with a plant, when the stomata are open, CO2 goes in, oxygen goes out, and with that oxygen, there's also going to be water. But if the weather is dry and hot, plants can lose a lot of water through the stomata. So what's the solution they have? The solution is close the stomata, and now they're saving water. But the problem is that CO2 is not coming in. And they are going to engage in a very problematic process of photorespiration. And I call it problematic. This is a disadvantage to the plant because instead of fixing carbon dioxide and making sugar, Rubisco, which I told you before is an imperfect protein, Rubisco begins fixing oxygen instead. Now, where is this oxygen coming from? The oxygen is coming from the light reactions, from the splitting of water, which is happening at the same time. And so if oxygen is fixed and photorespiration happens, the Calvin cycle doesn't produce the 3-carbon sugar G3P, glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate, produces a 2-carbon compound, and it also ends up releasing CO2 and water out of the cycle. Instead of bringing CO2 in, this ends up wasting whatever precious carbon dioxide we have in the leaf. And so with photorespiration, the plant will not be able to get the sugar it needs. And this process of photorespiration also requires ATP. And that's why we're calling it photorespiration, because it's releasing water, and instead of making sugar, it's going to be just producing these two byproducts that the plant cannot use. What are the plants that are going to be suffering in these dry and hot conditions? Well, you name it. Some important crops like rice and wheat are C3 plants. Plants in the rose family, peaches, plums are also C3 plants. So you can go on and on. Legumes are C3 plants, beans, peanuts, plants of the lily family, onions, garlic. Those are also going to be C3 plants. So it includes a wide variety of plants. The majority of plants on Earth, I would say, are going to be these C3 plants. And so how can a plant thrive in a hot and dry environment? Let's take a look at some of the plants we can find in tropical climates. For example, crops like sugarcane and corn are going to use a different strategy, which is called the C4 strategy. What you see in the leaf is that there's going to be the mesophyll cells. Those are the cells with the chloroplasts in abundance. And what these plants will do is that they're going to open the stomata only early in the morning and take in CO2, fix it into a 4-carbon compound. The 4-carbon compound is called oxaloacetate. And they are going to basically store all of that carbon dioxide, and then later in the middle part of the day when it gets really hot, then they close the stomata, and so the carbon dioxide they had stored previously in the mesophyll cells will be transported usually through the plasmodesmata. Remember those kinds of junctions between plant cells. Through plasmodesmata, malate or oxaloacetate, but usually malate, will be transported over to these cells of a bundle sheath. When you look at the veins of plants, those vascular vessels are going to have a bundle of cells surrounding them. Those are the bundle sheath cells. And so that is going to be where the Calvin cycle is going to be happening. This is going to be where CO2 will be fixed by Rubisco and is going to be capable of making our 3-carbon sugar G3P glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate. So what's the strategy? Again, the strategy is early in the morning or late in the afternoon when the day is cool, open the stomata, fix carbon dioxide, and later use the carbon dioxide previously stored during the middle part of the day when the stomata closes, so the Calvin cycle can be done, can be continued. And there are plants that can live in even more extreme environments than the tropics, like in the deserts. Here we see cacti, even pineapples that are grown in very hot tropical places. Those are going to be using a strategy called CAM. CAM stands for crassulacean acid metabolism. That's what CAM stands for. And this is called crassulacean acid because of the family of plants, the crassulaceans, which includes the cacti, the jade plants. They're all going to be included there. And the strategy that they use is going to be fixing carbon dioxide at nighttime. That's when the stomata would open up so that carbon can be fixed. The problem is as you recall, for the Calvin cycle to occur, we need ATP and NADPH provided by the light reactions. So what these plants have to do is they fix carbon dioxide, but they can only fix a limited amount during the nighttime. They save this 4-carbon compound, which serves as a source of carbon dioxide. And then when the sun is shining, the stomata is closed, but then they use the CO2 to run the Calvin cycle with ATP and electrons from NADPH that are coming from the light reactions. Because there is only so much carbon dioxide these plants can store at nighttime, they are going to be limited in their growth. And if you have ever kept a cactus, a live cactus in your home, you would know that those plants don't grow very fast. And so they have this limitation. Only fixing carbon dioxide at night limits how much photosynthesis they can do. And so, but the advantage is that these plants can live in real dry places, real hot places, like in the deserts, for example. And so C3, C4, and CAM metabolism are going to be 3 different carbon fixation strategies plants can use so they can accomplish their mission of making sugar in photosynthesis.